On August 18th, 15-year-old Tim Smashfield and his twin brother Tom set out for an adventure they had been eagerly anticipating for weeks. They were both avid explorers, having spent much of their childhood navigating the forests, lakes, and hills surrounding their home in Arkansas. This time, their destination was Devil's Den Cave. The hike to the cave entrance took them through a dense forest, with the familiar chirping of insects filling the air. The ground beneath their feet grew increasingly rocky, and they passed along the edges of clear lakes before finally reaching the cave's entrance, a large opening in the hillside. Cool air rushed from the cave, inviting them into the darkness. This is the tragic story of Tim Smashfield. There was something thrilling about the unknown, and neither of the brothers hesitated as they entered. Devil's Den Cave was known for its tight squeezes and deep crevices, but for two experienced explorers like Tim and Tom, these challenges only added to the excitement. As they ventured deeper into the cave, their headlamps cut through the inky blackness. The cave had an eerie beauty, with smooth, water-carved stones and sparkling mineral deposits lining the narrow passages. The air grew cooler the further they went, but it was a crack on the right-hand side, a fissure in the rock, that caught Tim's attention. It was a narrow 9-inch wide gap, barely large enough for someone to squeeze through. Tom hesitated for a moment, suggesting they stick to easier sections of the cave, but Tim's curiosity got the better of him. He had always been the more daring of the two, the one who took risks for the thrill of discovery. Ignoring Tom's caution, Tim squeezed into the crevice, determined to see how far it went. As he made his way down into the 20-foot long, 15-foot high, and 9-inch wide crack, the walls pressed against his body, forcing him to twist and contort to get deeper. Suddenly, his foot hit a fragile patch of rock at the bottom, and without warning, it slipped. Tim's left leg became jammed in the narrow space, wedged tightly between two unforgiving rock faces. His other leg, which had already rested on the slick walls, gave way as well, causing him to stretch awkwardly, pinned between the rock in a painful and precarious position. Panic surged through him. He called out to Tom, his voice strained. His left leg was stuck, and his right leg, which had slipped, was pulling his lower body down. The pressure on his trapped leg was unbearable, and the pain shot through his knee and ankle. Worse, the walls were too tight for him to adjust his position. Tim felt as though his body was being torn apart, fighting the agonizing stretch on one side and the crushing pressure on the other. Tom, hearing his brother's cries, rushed to the crevice. He crouched at the entrance, trying to get a better look. The narrow gap made it impossible for him to reach down and help his brother. Tim's leg was stuck fast, and there was no way Tom could pull him out on his own. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Tom sprinted back through the forest and to the cave, his heart pounding in his chest. By 5:30 p.m., he reached the park's visitor center, breathlessly telling the rangers what had happened. Jeremy Bruce and Tim Scott, two experienced park rangers, grabbed their rescue gear and followed Tom back to the cave. As they trekked through the familiar landscape, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. When they arrived at the cave entrance, they were greeted by the cool, damp air rushing from the depths. Bruce and Scott quickly assessed the situation and mentally prepared themselves for what they might face in the tight, dark passageways. Upon reaching the right-hand crevice, they realized Tim was much deeper in the crack than they had expected. The narrow passage made it difficult even to see him clearly. His voice echoed faintly from within the rock, strained with pain. The Rangers quickly realized that the situation was more complex than they had hoped. It wasn't just a matter of pulling Tim free. His foot was jammed tightly, and any wrong move could worsen his injuries or push him deeper into the crevice. With no time to waste, the Rangers decided to try using the tubular webbing they had brought with them. They threw one end down to Tim, instructing him to tie it around his body. Tim, though in considerable pain, managed to loop the webbing around his torso. Bruce and Scott tried to pull him up, but the narrow crevice and awkward angle of his body made it impossible to lift him with brute force alone. Tim cried out as the pressure on his trapped leg became too much. Realizing that this was a more delicate situation than they initially thought, Bruce called for backup, contacting Park Superintendent Jesse Cox and asking for cave rescue teams to assist. By 7:50 p.m., the cave rescuers had arrived and formed a plan. It was clear that pulling Tim sideways through the crevice wasn't going to work. The only option was to lift him straight up, but that had to be done carefully. Any misstep could worsen his injuries. They fashioned a loop from the webbing and prepared to hoist him up. Ranger Bruce climbed onto a ledge above the crevice, positioning himself directly over Tim. He lowered the loop down and encouraged Tim to work it under his arms and around his chest. Tim, exhausted and in pain, followed their instructions as the rescuers began to pull inch by inch. Tim's body slowly began to rise. Every tug brought excruciating pain as his leg fought against the rock. But he knew this was his only chance. Finally, his foot came loose, and the Rangers pulled him higher until he was within arm's reach of Scott. The team gave one last pull, and with a collective effort, they freed him from the grip of the rocks. It was 8:20 p.m. when Tim was finally pulled out of the crevice. His legs were bruised and swollen, but miraculously, he had escaped without any serious injuries. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more gripping tales from the underwater world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do in a situation like this? Until next time, stay safe, explore wisely, and always respect the depths.